All right, so get this. Today we're diving into something pretty wild. Does winning actually make you more likely to cheat? Kind of makes you think, right? You'd think winning would make you feel all good, maybe even like generous.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And, researchers have been looking into this for a while now, trying to figure it out. You'd think, like you said, maybe it's the folks who are losing who are more likely to bend the rules a little bit, trying to catch up, right?
Totally. But there's this study from way back in 2016 by Schur and Retoff, and they actually suggested the opposite. They found that winning a competition could actually lead to more cheating afterwards. Can you believe that?
It's pretty crazy, yeah. Their whole idea was that winning might actually create this, like, sense of entitlement, almost like you get a free pass to kind of, bend the rules because you're already a winner, like you deserve more or something.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that kind of thinking might sneak into someone's head. But is it really true, though? That's where Coleman and his team come in. Their 2022 paper really took a deep dive into this whole idea. They put it to the test not once, but twice.
And they were pretty clever about it, too. So for their first study, they got a bunch of students together and had them do this visual perception test. It was designed to be tricky, something completely new to everyone.
So no one could walk in feeling like, oh, I got this, I got an advantage.
Exactly. Everyone was starting from the same place, a level playing field. Then they randomly assigned the students to be either winners or losers. And to make sure this happened, they actually used a couple of their own people, ringers, who intentionally scored either super high or super low.
Oh, sneaky. So everyone genuinely believed that they had either won or lost, fair and square. So what happened next? What'd they do?
Okay, so then came the real test. They played this classic dice under a cup game. Participants roll the dice in secret, and then they report their score. The higher the roll, the more money they earn. It's a pretty classic way to study cheating because, well, it's tempting to just make up your score, right?
Oh, yeah, big time. Temptation is definitely a big part of the game. So what happened? Did all those winners start, pumping up their scores?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Ready for this? They found absolutely no difference in cheating between the winners, the losers, or even a control group who didn't even do the competition part. They just went straight to the dice game.
Wait, hold on. The winners didn't cheat more. That goes against everything that Schur and Ritoff's study said.
I know, right? It's pretty surprising. And this is where Coleman's study really stands out, I think. Remember, that earlier study, they didn't have as many people participating, and their methods weren't as strong, some limitations. But Coleman's team, they had way more participants, and they included this control group, which is super important. So their findings are a lot more reliable, statistically speaking.
So point for Team Coleman. But they didn't just stop there, did they?
Oh, no, they kept going. They knew that sometimes people act differently online, when they feel like they're more anonymous. So they designed a second study. And this time they did it all online.
Smart move. I mean, we've all heard those stories, right? People getting a little bolder online, maybe feeling like they can get away with more when they're not face-to-face.
And there's actually research to back that up. People do tend to be a bit more willing to, let's say, cut corners when they think no one's watching. So for this online study, they used a simple coin flip game. Participants flipped a coin 10 times and then reported how many times they got heads. Each heads they reported earned them money. Simple.
But definitely with, shall we say, some opportunities to maybe stretch the truth a little. Did they just do the same thing as the first study but online? Or did they mix it up?
They actually added something new. This time, they had two control groups. One group, like in the first study, just flipped the coin. But the second control group, they were told they were paired up with another player. But they didn't know if that other player had won or lost before.
Oh, interesting. So they were trying to figure out if it was winning or using itself that mattered, or just the fact that you were in a competition at all? That's clever.
Very clever. And the results, you ready for this? Once again, no difference in cheating. It didn't matter if you were a winner, a loser, or in either of the control groups.
So two strikes against that whole winning makes you cheat idea.
Yeah, it's looking pretty unlikely at this point. But here's where Coleman and his team really dug deep, and they found something super interesting.
I'm all ears. What did they find?
They took a closer look at the data, and they discovered that while winning or losing didn't seem to matter, something else did. A personality trait called inequality aversion.
Inequality aversion. I've never heard of that. What is it?
Basically, it's how much someone dislikes things being unequal, unfair. Some people really hate it when things aren't fair, while others aren't as bothered. And what they found was that people who weren't as bothered by inequality, meaning they were more okay with things being uneven, they actually cheated more.
Wow, that's unexpected. So it's not about winning or losing, but about how you feel about fairness in general.
That's what the data is telling us, yeah. And it didn't matter if someone had won or lost, it was just about their overall feelings about fairness.
Okay, this is getting really fascinating. So we've got these two studies that kind of debunk that whole winning makes you cheat idea. And now we've got this whole new thing about inequality aversion. What does it all mean?
Well, that's what we're going to get into next. It really makes you think. Maybe it's not about winning or losing that makes one cheat. Maybe it's all about how much they care about being fair in the first place.
It kind of flips the script, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of winners feeling all high and mighty and entitled to cheat, it's more like the people who aren't so worried about everyone getting a fair shake, those are the ones who might bend the rules a bit.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It challenges how we usually think about these things.
Cool.
It's not as simple as winning turns you into a bad person or losing makes you desperate. Something else is going on here, something deeper.
Yeah, and remember that idea about losers being more likely to cheat because they're trying to make up for their loss? That didn't really pan out either, did it?
Nope, not at all. So to dig into this whole thing a little more, Coleman's team, they had their participants fill out these questionnaires. They were trying to measure different personality traits, see if anything stood out.
Okay, so what kind of traits were they looking at? Give us some examples.
Well, they looked at things like self-confidence, for instance. You could make the argument that winners, since they're feeling good about themselves, might be a little more likely to cheat. Like maybe they think they're so awesome they can get away with it.
Interesting. Okay, what else? What other traits?
They also looked at belief in luck. That feeling of being on a roll. Maybe winners feel like they're invincible, like their luck will just hold out forever, so they take more risks, even with cheating.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing they also measured their sense of entitlement, right? That was like the big thing from that original
Oh,
study.
yeah, for sure. They definitely wanted to see if winners actually showed higher levels of entitlement and if that was the reason they cheated more.
All right, so what'd they find? Did any of these traits actually predict whether someone would cheat or not? Like, was there a connection?
Get this, none of them did. It's wild, right? Self-confidence, belief in luck, even that sense of entitlement. None of them seem to be connected to cheating.
No way. So much for those theories then. But they did find a link with that whole inequality aversion thing, right? So what's the connection there? Why would people who aren't so bothered by inequality be more likely to cheat? It seems kind of backward.
Well, yeah, it really does turn our thinking upside down. It almost seems like having a strong sense of fairness is like an internal safeguard.
Yeah.
If you really hate it when things aren't fair, you're more likely to stick to the rules, even if it means you personally don't come out ahead.
So it's like having this built-in moral compass that keeps you on the straight and narrow, even when you're tempted to stray.
Exactly. And, this finding opens up a whole new way to think about ethical behavior. It's not just about winning or losing, it's more about our core beliefs about fairness and how those beliefs shape the way we act.
Okay, yeah, this is definitely giving us a lot to chew on. So these two studies from Coleman's team, they really poke some holes in that winning makes you cheat idea. But then they also open up all these new questions, right? Like, what is it about this inequality aversion thing that seems to make people more honest? Is it something we're born with, or do we learn it?
That's the big question, isn't it? And if we can figure out how to cultivate this sense of fairness in people, maybe we could actually reduce cheating. Wouldn't that be something?
Oh, man, that would be incredible. That's a study I'd love to see. What if, instead of just telling people not to cheat, we help them understand why fairness is so important?
It's like teaching them to be real ethical thinkers, not just rule followers.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's a much better approach to, like, promoting ethical behavior in the long run. But hey, hold on. Let's not get too carried away here. Like with any research, we got to keep in mind that there are always limitations, right?
Oh, absolutely. Good point.
These studies were done with students, and they used those specific games. So who's to say we'd see the same results with different groups of people in different settings?
That's always the challenge, isn't it? Trying to figure out how much we can take from one study and apply it to the real world.
Yeah,
Researchers are always wrestling with that.
very true. But even with those limitations, I think these studies give us a really valuable counterpoint to that whole success breeds bad behavior idea. It's way too simplistic.
Oh, for sure. It's way more complicated than that. It's not just about winning. It's about this whole messy mix of individual personalities, the situation you're in, how you see fairness. It's a lot to unpack.
You know what else really struck me? That whole online versus in-person thing. The fact that they didn't find a huge difference in cheating between the lab setting and the online environment.
Mm.
That's kind of surprising, don't you think? I mean, we always hear about how the internet is this crazy Wild West where anything goes.
It is surprising, especially with all the talk about how online anonymity makes people act worse, like they can get away with more. But remember, Coleman's team, they set up that lab experiment in a way that also gave people a sense of privacy. So maybe the participants felt just as comfortable cheating in person as they did online.
That's a really good point. It just shows how the specifics of the situation can influence our behavior, even when it comes to something like cheating, like the context matters.
Absolutely. And remember how the overall cheating rates were actually lower in the online study, even though people could potentially win a lot more money?
Yeah, that was weird. You'd think with more money at stake, more people would be tempted to cheat.
Right. It seems counterintuitive. But even when people feel kind of anonymous online, it seems like there's still this caution there, this awareness that there might be consequences, even if they're not obvious right away.
Like that little voice in your head that's saying, uh-oh, what if they figure out what I did?
Exactly. And that little voice, it might get a little louder when there's more on the line. It shows that even when we're in these online spaces where we feel invisible, our sense of right and wrong doesn't just disappear. It's still there.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? I feel like we've uncovered a lot, but also opened up a whole can of worms with even more questions.
Well, that's what a good deep dive is supposed to do, right? It's not about having all the answers. It's about getting curious, questioning what we think we know, and just understanding ourselves and the world around us a little bit better.
You said it. This whole thing has really given us a lot to think about. Does winning make you cheat? Well, the evidence says probably not. But the things that actually do influence whether we act ethically or not, that's a conversation we need to keep having.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening out there, here's a little something to ponder. What role does fairness play in your life? How do your own values and beliefs guide your actions, especially when you're tempted to do something that might help you but isn't exactly fair?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep those moral compasses pointed in the right direction.